Hello everyone. Recently I talked about the video games that I have been playing lately, and now I wanted to talk briefly about the shows that I've been watching. Partially because I just saw the latest Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, yesterday, and I wanted to very briefly talk about that, trying to remain vague and spoiler free because it's fairly new and a lot of people have seen it, but just give you my general overall impression because I've noticed just randomly through seeing comments and things on social media, not really reading any reviews, just seeing people's reactions overall, it seems to be very divisive. There's a lot of, I absolutely hate this movie, and then a lot of, I absolutely love this movie, and I've not seen anything in between, which a lot of times that's just because those very strong opinions are the ones that are the loudest thing you see as you're scrolling through something like Twitter or whatever. But I want to talk about it because I'm somewhere right in the middle. It was a very weird experience. But before that, I have been watching the latest season of Strange New Worlds, and on my other channel, Trek a Day, if you're not subscribed to that, I talk about those episodes every week as they come out. And I've also been catching up on Star Trek Lower Deck. I only saw the first few episodes, and that's definitely one to talk about, so I have those videos coming up on that channel. And as far as Indiana Jones, I saw it yesterday with my brother-in-law, and we talked about it afterwards and had very similar feelings. It was an odd mix of stuff that we really liked and things that we really did not like. And a lot of the things that we didn't like were very similar, and a lot of it had to do with the emotional connection and the suspension of disbelief and those elements which were really missing. And some of that was within the writing, some of that was within the visual effects. And first off, with the visual effects, without spoiling anything, before watching the movie there were the trailers, and there was a trailer for the latest upcoming Mission Impossible movie. Not really a series of movies I was ever really into, but one thing that I noticed was the train sequence that was shown in part in the trailer, and it was a practical, well put together looking sequence from the bit that we got in the trailer. And then coming to Indiana Jones, very early on there is a train sequence, and it looked and felt very fake, which was something that plagued a lot of the moments in this movie, where it was missing that gritty, real feeling through a lot of the visual effects. And none of it ever really felt like it was really happening. It never really drew you in. You never had that moment of suspension of disbelief where within that 2-hour time frame that you're watching that movie, you can just kind of get absorbed and forget reality, and this feels like it's reality, like it's something that's really happening, and you're just watching, voyeuristically these events. There was never that connection, because a lot of the effects, for something that has such an extremely bloated budget, it's something that's plagued a lot of these big budget movies recently, where a lot of the visual effects somehow look worse than movies 10-15 years ago, even the digital effects. And the de-aging was one thing that's talked about that was actually not bad. The combination of using the Harrison Ford lifelike mask and fully doing the de-aging with the CG, and just the combination of everything and makeup, and that worked pretty well. Like, you could tell, but it was fairly well done. I didn't really have a problem with that. It didn't take me out too much because it was also fairly sparingly used, a lot of dark lighting in some shots, but there were just a lot of visual effects in the stunts. And there was a chase scene later on, like a car chase scene, that had the same thing, where it felt so fake and studio, and just didn't draw you in. It didn't feel real. You missed that suspension of disbelief, and that was a big problem because it's a very stunt and action scene oriented movie, and for a lot of that to just not come together was a big problem. And then writing wise, there are some issues we both had with the characters and the overall story. It's a movie that for me I kind of split in two. Without spoiling anything, there's a section later on in the movie where they go to a cave, and that's kind of the point for me, where from then on I was okay and enjoyed most of the movie. I actually really liked some of the sequences and some of the storytelling, and there were things I liked more than I disliked from that point forward. But before that was the opposite, where I disliked more than what I liked. A lot of it just was not clicking, both narratively and visually. It felt just, it just did not feel like a good Indiana Jones production. Even though I had the moments, like the opening flashback that you see, there were parts in that I really liked, but then some effects and situations that just felt so undercooked, really just not reaching their full potential. And just there was a lot story-wise and things that were not working well for me in that first part of the movie. But towards the end, again, there were still some things I disliked, but overall it was better towards the end, to where I ended up liking most of it. It was a very odd mix of some performances I really liked and some not so much as well. Harrison Ford, within the confines of what this story was, did a good job with this aging version of Indy kind of coming to the end of his time, the end of his rope, and dealing with the emotional situations surrounding his life at that stage, and what his relationship is, without spoiling anything, with Marion at the time, and his events with his son. So those worked well. The main villain, Jürgen Voller, was fantastic in that very typical, stereotypical Nazi role. Like, he did a very, very good job. So there's a good mix there. And then you get to the meat of the sidekick situation, where I feel like there's a lot of love-hate. You have Helena Shaw, who for me was a bit mixed. I really don't feel strongly either way. Some people seem to really be focusing a lot of their dislike with this movie on Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who plays Helena, and some people really, really like her character. And I'm kind of in the middle. To me, it didn't feel like her character had as much of an emotional impact or connection with the audience as I would have liked, but I didn't super dislike her. Actually, I think she's a big step up from Shia LaBeouf in Crystal Skull. Definitely a better sidekick character than that, a little more depth to her character, but a lot of it felt like her character just wasn't quite there with the potential of how she was written. I felt she needed a little more characterization and focus on the backstory, and a little bit better of a showing of her reconnection with the character of Indy. She was decent. That's where I'll kind of leave it, and that's how I felt overall about the movie. It was okay, and there were things that I disliked and things that I liked, and there were high moments and low moments. It just was a middle of the road movie, which is a little more disappointing because it isn't Indiana Jones, but overall I thought it was better than Crystal Skull. And then you had one issue of, there's sort of this third wheel. There's a kid character who's tied to Helena, and then he's in part of the events later in the movie, and he felt like a very underutilized, really unneeded third wheel through a lot of it. You had a little bit of a build up and payoff to an element of his character, but even that didn't really feel needed. Everything about his character felt very unnecessary. Like, you take him out of the movie completely and it wouldn't really change anything thematically or dramatically. I didn't really believe the connection that he was supposed to have with Helena. Just didn't quite click or ring true, and there was no build of any sort of emotional connection with Indy with that character either. It was kind of the opposite of the relationship with Short Round, who you immediately felt that bond, and here it felt like this kid who was just kind of tagging along and really didn't play a very important role. And that was sort of disappointing to see, that it just didn't feel like that character was given any true purpose or connection. There were a lot of scenes where it felt like the scene was structured and everything was playing well, and then it's like, oh wait, the kid's also there, what's he doing? It didn't feel like a necessary character. And there were some other little side characters like that too, where it felt like this movie needed a little bit of retooling and trimming, and had these sort of extraneous elements that took away more than they added. Overall, it is a movie that, I would give it a solid maybe 7 out of 10, because the good outweighed the negative for me by the end of the movie. It's definitely one I want to rewatch again, but that's where I'll leave it. Again, try not to get into too many specifics or spoil a whole lot. My overall impression, go after leaving the movie was, it was an okay experience. I just never felt truly engrossed or connected with it. A lot of disconnect with a lot of the visuals, and the storytelling just wasn't quite there. But I wouldn't go so far to say it was a bad movie, because I didn't think it was, and there were those good, fun Indiana Jones style adventure moments. Those few that did worked very well and were enjoyable, and I was satisfied with the ending, the overall portrayal of Indiana Jones, because you're not going to get, I think a lot of people seem disappointed wanting to go in and see the old Indy and his style of character and adventure, but this is someone who's in a completely different point in his life, and physically wouldn't even be capable of doing what people want. So I think there is a little bit of undeserved hatred towards that element of the movie. I think it rang true and very believable for a character who is in that stage of his life and the events that occurred leading up to that point. So I think it's just different perspectives, and I think overall it was okay. It wasn't this great, amazing ending and tribute to the character and the series, but it was a decent ending overall. I liked it.